When we picture the wild and untamed American frontier, we typically see high noon standoffs and dust-kicking horses. But those movies leave out the logistics of basic daily hygiene. Between 1850 and 1900, the Wild West completely lacked indoor plumbing and flush toilets. Instead, settlers relied on the outhouse. This was a tiny wooden shed positioned directly over a steep pit, usually dug 5 to 6 feet straight down into the earth. This diagram shows the strict zoning rules of a frontier homestead. Builders were mandated to position outhouses exactly 50 to 100 feet away from the main residence. The first reason for this distance was the smell. Without flowing water to wash the waste away, the concentrated stench of an unflushed pit made living nearby impossible. The second reason was biological safety. Looking at this cross-section of the soil, you can see how easily raw sewage could leach through the dirt and poison the homestead's primary drinking well. By isolating their waste, pioneers protected their drinking water. But this necessary engineering created a mathematical problem. They were relying on a critical sanitation system that had a strictly finite capacity. Eventually, every pit filled up. After months or years of continuous family use, the waste inevitably reached the brim. They had no modern septic system and no vacuum trucks to pull the sewage out. For settlers who lacked excess land, the only option was manual extraction. Men known as night soil collectors would arrive after dark, using shovels and buckets to scoop the raw waste out of the pit by hand. It was agonizing, dangerous work, and the vast majority of the frontier population went out of their way to avoid doing it. Rather than deal with the logistical nightmare of emptying a full latrine, most pioneers engineered a lazier, yet highly effective spatial bypass. They solved the capacity crisis through a collaborative community effort known as the relocation method. Here, in this cross-section, you can see step 1. They simply excavated a brand new 6-foot-deep hole a few feet away from the original. In step 2, the men of the household would recruit a few neighbors. Together, they physically lifted the entire wooden structure off the ground and carried it over to perfectly align with the new hole. Finally, step 3. They capped the old full pit with dry soil, ash, and lime. These materials neutralized the hazards and allowed the waste to slowly compost into fertilizer. Even with a fresh pit, daily hygiene was abrasive. Without modern toilet paper, settlers cleaned themselves using discarded newspapers and baskets of dried corn cobs. And the wooden shed itself invited biological hazards. The intense smell attracted swarms of flies, which in turn drew highly venomous black widow spiders that spun webs directly beneath the seeding holes. To manage the smell and darkness, builders carved cutouts into the doors to provide ventilation and sunlight. The famous crescent moon shape actually served as a functional guide for illiterate citizens to identify the women's facility. Maintaining basic sanitation out west was a harsh act of survival, demanding an endless cycle of digging holes, moving buildings, and burying waste. 150 years later, the ultimate consequence of this endless digging cycle has presented itself. Modern archaeologists actually spend their time hunting down and intentionally excavating these exact century-old human waste pits. When pioneers used the outhouse, they frequently lost their grip on personal items, dropping them straight down the latrine hole. Others deliberately tossed secret letters into the pit to hide them forever. Today, researchers pull high-value artifacts directly out of that dirt, uncovering gold coins, bullets, combs, and completely intact medicine vials. The preservation relies entirely on how the settlers capped the holes. By packing the full pits with ash and dry soil, they accidentally created an anaerobic, hermetically sealed environment. This chemistry protected fragile artifacts from decomposing. The pioneers were just looking for a practical workaround to a disgusting chore. Instead, they accidentally buried thousands of time capsules, leaving modern science with an unfiltered, highly accurate record of daily life on the American frontier.
Between 1850 and 1900, standard living conditions on the American frontier lacked all modern infrastructure. Indoor plumbing and flushing toilets simply did not exist. Families relied on a small, isolated wooden shack sitting directly over a hand-dug pit, typically about 6 feet deep. These structures were built at a distance of 50 to 100 feet from the home for a single practical reason. The overwhelming odor of a dry pit would have made living in the main house impossible. There was also a critical biological threat. The outhouse had to be far from the drinking well, letting the soil act as a natural filter. Otherwise, human waste could seep into the well, causing waterborne disease outbreaks that could decimate a homestead in weeks. This forced physical isolation turned the outhouse into a distinct, detached environment, far removed from the safety of the main residence. After months or years of use, every pioneer family faced a logistical crisis. The 6-foot pit eventually filled to the brim. While some families hired laborers, known as night soil collectors, to manually shovel out the waste under the cover of darkness, most frontiersmen went to great lengths to avoid this repulsive chore. Instead, they adopted a more pragmatic, labor-saving solution that favored moving the toilet rather than cleaning it. The family would dig a fresh hole nearby and enlist neighbors to physically lift the entire wooden shock, moving it onto the new pit. They would then fill the old, overflowing hole with dry soil, ash, and lime, abandoning it completely. This process of covering and abandoning the pit inadvertently acted as an airtight seal, locking the contents safely underground for centuries. To understand why valuables were lost in these pits, we have to look at the bizarre experience inside these dark, isolated shacks. Without soft toilet paper, pioneers used harsh printed materials like old newspapers and mail-order catalogs. A common, even rougher alternative was kept in a basket inside the shack: dried corn cobs. The dark environment harbored physical dangers. Venomous black widow spiders and snakes were attracted to the insects beneath the seats, making bites a constant hazard. Some outhouses were designed as multi-seaters for social gossip, and they even served as emergency hiding places from bandits, who tended to avoid the foul-smelling structures. When you combine pitch-black conditions, fumbling with corn cobs, defending against spiders, and hiding from criminals, it's easy to see how valuables accidentally slipped from pockets into the unreachable void. Modern excavations are now proving that the pioneer habit of relocating outhouses created a massive network of underground archives. Because homesteads moved their toilets multiple times over several decades, they created a precise chronological timeline of their lifestyle, diet, and secrets. This gritty, biological reality of pioneer survival contrasts sharply with the spotless cinematic vision of the Wild West portrayed by Hollywood. The most accurate historical record of the American frontier is found in the practical, daily management of human waste. While we can be grateful for modern plumbing, the Old West's dirty secret proves that history's greatest insights often come from the very places we were most desperate to bury.